Did you see the dark side of the ring this past week? I once again lit up the small screen the way I do the silver screen with my witty and incisive commentary. But this week, Dark Side of the Ring was on the entire career, not just my involvement in of it. The man they call Vader. Are you up on Dark Side?
I did see the episode, yes.
And I thought they did a good job in this one because, between myself, JR, Mick, Nick Patrick, but also his family, his son, Jesse, and his ex-wife, his friend, Dave. Dave's not here, man. Stan Hansen, Jerry Briscoe. They got the budget must be increasing for the talking head. I wonder if I need to ask for a raise.
You should tell them to make it Dark Side of the Ring starring Jim Cornette.
Oh, come on now.
Well, that's what I would do if I was negotiating for you.
I know, but I'm not trying to hog the spotlight again. The magnitude of me, sometimes I need to pull back to give others the spotlight. For heaven's sake, I'm nearing the sunset of my years. I want to fade off slowly down Ventura Highway in the summertime. Anyway, we came back to Dark Side of the Ring on Vice TV. And Mick Foley, again, very articulate. Is it somehow has brain damage helped his goddamn verbal ability? He always comes up with a profound thing to say or a very articulate or insightful comment or whatever. I'm thinking maybe more of us ought to get whacked over the head with a chair every couple of days for a few years. You want to go first, Brian?
No, and maybe it's just a work. Maybe he's perfectly fine. But he knows that if he keeps telling people he has brain damage, they'll be so surprised when he spits out a sentence. Because every time I see him, he seems like he's perfectly fine.
Yes, I mean, I wish that if I had fucking wrestling schools full of people who could talk like that, it would be right as rain. Anyway, it occurred to me that when they went into some of Leon's childhood, which I was not aware of the exact nature of the rotten neighborhood he grew up in, or some of the stories that his family told. But when they went into that, he kind of found sports, as a way, as many people do, to focus himself. And he played football and he was, pretty good in college, but then he was drafted by the Los Angeles Rams, but injuries at that point, which would play a part with him on and off, because of his size all his life. But he was drafted by the Rams, but never actually got to play with them. He was drafted, as the graphic said, in 1978. But then they had him from previous footage that he'd recorded before he passed, telling a story about how he barged into the locker room in Denver. He's from Colorado, and told Bruiser Brody that he was there to find a job and trained in the AWA, which he did. I had not heard that. Had you heard the Brody story about? Because I hadn't heard it.
I had not heard that before, no.
But it makes sense that Brody was working for Vern at that point in time. You can imagine Leon White. He said he got all dressed up, right? He needs a job. He sees wrestling on TV. I can see him going down there and being somebody in the community. I can see him some way or another bluffing his way in the locker room. And I can see Bruiser Brody standing up and saying, "Who the fuck are you?" I just had never heard that story, but he wanted a job. And however, he went down there, he made a connection. Vern did break him in.
Who trained him? Didn't he actually say in this thing who trained him?
Well, see, that's the thing is, I don't know specifically, but in that era, I would imagine that Brad Rheingans may have had something to do with it in the mid 80s.
Because they mentioned that Brody, had that conversation quickly in the locker room, which I had never heard before. And then the next thing they show is him and Brody wrestling in the ring. Like that was how he was taught, which clearly was not.
Well, no, yeah, this was a gloss over because we got to get to the rest of his life. But that's another thing is his family didn't provide any perspective on he would have talked to Brody in the AWA and barged in or whatever somewhere around 84-ish because he was already in the ring by 85 and they would have given him some level of training. And that's why I'm thinking, as I recall, probably Greg Gagne, had something to do with it. But I think Ringens was starting to, at that time, work with the camp guys that they might have as Vern's camps were slowing down. Point being, what did he do between being drafted but not playing in 1978 and 1984? He was just kind of floating. And see, that's something else that we've talked about before. Is Leon started late. I mean, he picked things up quick, but for the sake of his athletic prime, he started late when he was already somewhere around 30. I can't remember the exact age. But then you see him working with Hanson and Brody in the stiff shit. And, we've talked about this also, that Leon Baby Bull White and even Bull Power for Otto Vons in Germany, Austria was not exactly a Bafo gimmick. And he was green as a pepper tree. He was starting from scratch. But when they gave him the Vader gimmick in Japan, and at the, for a first however long, all he had to do was steamroll people, he got in the ring with world-class talent and picked it up and how to work as himself and the basic concept of, try not to kill people and make it look good very quickly. But at that point, when they get into the Japanese stuff, I'm glad they had Hanson there for the eyeball thing. That was just grotesque. But you can literally see Leon with his fucking fingers kind of pushing it back in and closing his shit over the top of it. That was just nasty. But Stan Hansen is as blind as a bat. He's so nearsighted. The glasses are not a gimmick.
They didn't even bring up the fact that was a big inter-promotional match. It was a dream match. It was New Japan versus All Japan.
I don't know that the Vice TV audience on Tuesday night was.
They left a lot of stuff.
Deep.
I have to say, I was so disappointed with this. There was some good stuff in it, but it wasn't like, I really liked the first episode. They glossed past stuff. They introduced things. The timeline was just completely out of whack. At one point it went, the very end, it was just like all of a sudden we went from here to he's dead.
Well, yeah.
I mean, they left out a ton of shit. Just a ton of shit.
Well, they only had 45 minutes, but yeah, we're going to because they made a couple more leaps here.
I mean, Mick Foley's saying that the whole thing with him and Vader elevated WCW. It didn't do anything for WCW. WCW was dead. It elevated Mick Foley's career. That got more attention on Mick Foley and Cactus Jack in '93 than anything else had up to that point.
Yeah, even and the reason why that it got the attention to him was because they edited it. Remember when he agreed to have Vader hard wave and came up with the idea and wanted him to and had him hard wave, and they showed one eye punch on this on the highlights here. But WCW, they ordered the cameras to pull back and they edited some of the shit because they thought it was too violent. So he got beat up and most of it didn't make air. But because of the cacophony from, at the time, the emerging smart fan base and people who heard about it, that got more talk about Mick maybe than having seen it. Go ahead.
No, but also I think another thing that it's kind of important, especially with the narrative they tried to weave here. Vader lost the fight to Paul Orndorff, and his wife said that was kind of the beginning of the end.
Yeah.
Nothing went right in WWE. He went to UWFI. Remember, they brought him in to be the guy to help get Takada over. Not that Takada wasn't already over, but that's a pretty big thing. It was the credibility of Vader being a badass that he could fit in with those guys over in UWFI, and that's what they were looking for. But that was all around that same period of time, too. And the Hogan stuff, they pointed at the Hogan stuff. If you remember the Baltimore pay-per-view, fans brought a giant sign that they hung from the top that said, "Shoot Vader, shoot." Like the fans wanted it. They made it sound like, it was kind of an impasse because Hogan worked soft and Vader was big and bad. The fans really wanted something to happen. A lot of WCW fans at that point.
Oh, yeah, because they were already sick of Hulk to begin with at that point. But now the one thing though, I agree with you. The UWFI was a big deal, but what his wife said was that was really the start of the decline, not maybe necessarily financially in his career at that point, but him starting to make bad decisions. That was the start of that. And I think that, that you can probably say it was right because everything had gone, great for Vader around the world until that point. And then he's out of WCW and and after the Joe Thurman, they had Joe Thurman.
Yeah, I've never seen him interviewed. I couldn't believe what he looked like now.
And well, he looks better now than he did then.
Yeah, I didn't even think it was the same guy.
Yeah, a good back breaking's good for you, I guess, 20 years later. But, I'm trying, knowing Leon, right? But also, I'm trying to listen to Joe Thurman's description of what happened. Would he say, can you take the power bomb? Yeah, okay, see you out there. I can see that. And it was a handicap match, and it was Vader. It's not like they're going to set up any spots ahead of time. And Thurman said, as soon as they got in the ring, he said they're playing into the story that Leon became Vader, which we've talked about, and got his head mad. Sometimes he couldn't turn it off right away. But Thurman said in the ring, it changed. As soon as he picked him up, it was like, come here, you little son of a bitch. You going to go up for this or whatever he said. From just the highlights that they showed, it looks like that maybe Joe Thurman, when Leon first did whatever he did, I think, did he reach out in one of those bear paws to the head? Thurman kind of delayed and kind of staggered, like he didn't go down on something or the chest bump or whatever, because I think he was probably like, what the fuck was that? I don't know what to do. And then Leon hammered him, and I'm thinking could Leon have been mad because he didn't take a bump? But I don't, they didn't show the whole match in unedited, but I could only see in that situation, Leon just out of nowhere saying, you're going to go up for this, you little son of a bitch, or you sack of shit or whatever. If something previously had been like, what the fuck, does this guy have any idea what he's doing? But nevertheless, on the power bomb, it looked to me like he threw him more out of disgust, like, here, this is over with, than he did trying to throw him down with any force. But when he did that, he over-rotated him, and the guy's fucking knees came up over his shoulders. So it's no wonder he broke his back. But Jesus Christ. And it looked, but now and I was about to say one more thing. They said Leon in the locker room afterwards, and I fully believe this, because, and Mick said it, he wouldn't lie, was upset and distraught and etc. I believe that. But Thurman said as soon as Vader looked down at him, you could see that he was upset or he was distraught or whatever. No, the footage they showed of the actual incident, as soon as Leon got up, he looked down at him like, you stupid motherfucker. So I think he thought that he had just powerbombed the guy and covered him, and the guy couldn't work or whatever. And he thought he was a piece of shit. And then when he realized, or somebody told him, well, yeah, he's fucked up, then he legitimately did get, concerned, but he didn't know right away. That's the point I was going to make.
What do you think about what they said about his reaction afterwards, where he went to Joe Thurman in the hospital and he was crying about it, and his wife talked about how emotional he could be at times? Did you ever see that side of him?
Yes. See, that's why I'm saying I believe all of that, because it just wouldn't have happened in the ring. It would have been when he got back and saw something was wrong and people were upset, and then it would go the complete other way. Remember, the guy who works himself up to go and be Vader, and his son referenced it, that time in, I think it was Tulsa, when he pulled Michaels' hair too hard, and fucking Michaels fired up some kind of comeback, and Leon took a bump, rolled out of the ring, and he had tears in his eyes because He just said if I pull his hair like that one more time, it'll be my job. And then, again, he could be pissed off about something, but he would see a kid in a wheelchair over in the corner and he'd be over there with tears puddling up in his eyes. He would just back and forth, boom, boom, which was, that at points he had admitted that it was hard for him to turn off Vader, and his wife apparently at one point was scared to leave him because she thought he might kill her. But then otherwise, yes, he would get or he'd get meaningful, like he'd have a sit down of a. But Mr. McMahon, it would be so much more beneficial to the athletes if we could have a full set of barbells on the ring truck or whatever. I mean, he would go and make pitches like that. Like, remember when he first started cussing out the commentator, the announcer, the TV host in Saudi Arabia? Right before he started snatching me, he said, frankly, I'm insulted by your insinuation. He would start out like that, and suddenly he'd snatch a motherfucker. His emotions were back and forth.
The Shawn Michaels stuff here was really interesting. Obviously, we got to see you the most fired up you've been in several seasons on this show. But, that's what led to Sid getting his run. Leading to the Alamo Dome was the fact that Shawn didn't want to work with Vader, wouldn't, and his wife said Shawn was Vince's boy, and Vader would never be anyone's boy. And again, I think the more you look at that period of time and the strange control that Shawn Michaels had over Vince, considering he wasn't doing good business, there's still a lot of questions that need to be answered about why was so much allowed from Shawn Michaels.
I've never
Buddy Rogers drew money, Buddy Rogers was a pain in the ass, but Buddy Rogers drew money. Shawn Michaels didn't. And
I've said before a million times, I've never seen and not only Michaels, but his circle, whatever his circle was around him, the level of put-upness with stuff from anybody. But and there's something Vince saw something about himself in Shawn, some of the boyhood dream that you could see the gleam in his eye. But
a lot of people think that Vince saw a lot of himself in Shawn Michaels.
Well, you know what I mean. But nevertheless, but the point is that did sabotage Vader's run because, and I've mentioned this, and it wasn't like that Vince told me this because I was talent involved in the match, and they always tell talent bullshit. I was on the creative team. This was the creative meeting. We were planning the structure of the pay-per-views and the schedule for the company for the next 6 months. And originally, SummerSlam 96, it would be Michaels and Vader, as it was in Cleveland, I believe we were. And the reason they did Brian, I can't put one foot in front of another without seeing it in front of me, but they did 2 false finishes and 2 restarts, as I think you'll remember. And then finally, Michaels got a quick one, as Vince used to say, but there was room, but there was controversy. There was room for rematches. Originally, again, before that match even came up, Vader was probably going to go over a bit stronger we were going to throw it out at SummerSlam, is what I'm trying to say, with some kind of disputed finish that nobody would get pinned. Then Vader was going to win the title from Michaels at the Survivor Series in November. And that would culminate in January, as everybody recalls, which was in San Antonio, Texas at the Alamo Dome. And they didn't do stadiums back then. But Vince wanted to, with a cheap general admission ticket in Shawn Michaels' hometown, draw 50,000 people or whatever it was to see Michaels beat Vader and win the title back. That was the 3 pay-per-view program that he wanted to do before the whole thing got started. And by the time that, again, they did house show matches beforehand in those days between guys. So by the time during July or early August, whatever it was, that Leon had worked with Michaels in the house shows, they changed the SummerSlam finish to, instead of just being thrown out in all the confusion, they threw it out twice and then had a quick one. So Michaels at least left with a win. And then by shortly after that, Vader was ixnayed out of Survivor Series and Royal Rumble.
And if you remember, the
Michaels,
Survivor Series crowd in New York turned on Shawn Michaels. They made Sid the big babyface that night. It was a really interesting dynamic. And again, Shawn Michaels kind of got away with everything. And for anyone who's new to the show, Jim did a watch-along of that match, Shawn versus Vader at SummerSlam, and that's on the YouTube channel.
Yes, and that's why I was so pissed off. Because I could understand Michaels being a prick was not news at that point, right? Was not, just goddamn, oh my God, this is unheard of. But actually, in the middle of a fucking main event world title match on pay-per-view and in front of whatever it was, 18,000 or 20,000 people in Cleveland, to just stop and go, move, I said move. You dumb motherfucker. And just, I couldn't believe it. Not even, he could have grabbed a chin lock on him and whispered in his ear, I hate you and I'm going to get you fired. But don't scream it in front of the people. But anyway, nevertheless, Vince lost interest. We've covered these things about his WWF stay. And as Jim Ross said, Leon also was high maintenance. You couldn't get him happy or healthy both at the same time.
Hey, Jim Ross said something here about the Duke Weight Loss Clinic. I know you've always talked about in the past with Yokozuna. I didn't realize Yokozuna went there with Vader.
Can I be honest with you?
Yeah.
As Ernie Ladd said to me one time when he was courting us for Vince McMahon in 1986, have I ever lied to you? I'm not trying to cast aspersions on JR's veracity, but his memory at this point in time of events from 30 years ago may be conflated because no, they didn't go at the same time. But Yoko went. He went, and he's the one that had the Underground Railroad for fried chicken going on. Leon, I don't believe actually got sent to Duke. It was discussed because it had happened with Yokozuna before, but Leon is the one who JR on Vince's behest had to negotiate a weight clause into his contract because he got, I'm going to say, up to 440. And that was too much, especially at his age. So, and there was much consternation. Leon was very insulted that, but he had played in the NFL. And it wasn't like that, should have been a big shock. But nevertheless, but JR remembers them hanging out in bunk beds. Boy, can you see the size of those bunk beds over at Duke, losing weight and eating chicken. But anyway, so that, I think Mick Foley, again, he put it best with Leon's run in the WWF. He was browbeaten until he lost his mojo. And I think that's kind of, the thing, unfortunately. And then, his wife said he had a pain pill issue. His son had gone to college and his wife had left him. So he's drinking and sleeping for days at a time. And I guess that was probably out of Brian. You kept up with that stuff at that point in time better than I did. But when he went into the diabetic coma in Japan, was that potentially the end of his Japanese deal? They generally didn't like boys going into comas over there.
Well, see, that's the thing I actually have to go back and look at. It definitely wasn't. I mean, I got to see the timeline because it went from he left WWF to he goes into the coma to he's dead. There's a lot of time. He returned to Raw, made a few guest appearances. They didn't always turn out well. I remember when he tripped, and I think it was because of his weight, maybe.
Yeah.
But he made a return.
But also, there was like 15 years, 18 years or whatever.
I mean, I saw him wrestle Will Ospreay.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's not like, he just left WWF and got sick and died. I don't know about how many Japan tours he did after the fact. I mean, it didn't stop Japan from bringing Terry Gordy over. He may have
Well,
stopped
but
Baba, but it didn't stop him from going to Japan.
I'm thinking that, and again, it's just going off of memory, that Leon was away from the wrestling business for quite a while. The early 2000s, I think, would have wrapped up anything he did in Japan, except maybe, an appearance, but not any type of regular wrestling. And I remember because he talked about it when I managed him, he had an interest in some type of real estate, whether it was a strip mall or commercial property, whatever, in Colorado, and managed that. But then suddenly, mid 20 teens, he started popping up doing fan fests and conventions again. He hadn't been around in a while. And that's why I saw him in Lexington at LexCon one year. And he did the thing with Osprey. For a little while there, he did some more matches. And then he announced that the doctors had given him 2 years to live with congestive heart failure. But yeah, this episode went from the early 2000s to, well, I've announced I've got 2 years to live. There's 15 years in between. So, and then as I recall, after he had his quadruple bypass and the initial heart issues, he was still able, was he not, to do some limited autograph sessions or whatever. And then, he obviously caught sick, and they said pneumonia, and went into a coma and passed away in the hospital.
What was it like when you ran into him? What was his reaction? Because obviously you managed him and you hadn't seen him in many years. Was he warm and everything?
Well, yeah. Well, how was he warm?
Did he hug you?
We went for the classic wrestler handshake and the hug at the same time with the left arm. Yes, we did that. And his booth was next to mine, and they had given him one of the Fan Fest helpers, but I tried to clue him in on what some of the shortcuts were around the area. And, we chatted back and forth when we weren't busy, but there was no issue or anything like that. But I think that's another thing. When he told me what he'd been doing, he made it sound more interesting maybe than it sounded like from this show. But yeah, that's the thing. But I will say that it seemed like that he didn't understand the fan fest circuit or the independent circuit, that he was still trying to hold everybody to the state. Well, it's like the NFL players, they would do this for them. Yeah, this ain't that.
Well,
but anyway,
Dark Side of the Ring Vader, and of course, next week is the Tony Atlas episode.
Yeah, Mr. USA Tony Atlas, and I want you to watch it Tuesday nights at 10 o'clock, folks, Eastern time on Vice TV. I don't think I'm on this one. I'm not sure. I can't remember. We talk about so many things. But one way or another, it's going to be a good program, even if I'm not on it. It just won't be,
it just won't be it just won't be one of the more popular episodes, because you've been on every episode this season and everyone thinks of you. They should really make it Dark Side of the Ring starring Jim Cornette.
What about Dark Side of Jim Cornette starring The Ring?
Oh, I don't know if you're prepared for that.
Well, but anyway, nevertheless, folks, and Brian, you'll agree with, we just talked about Vader's. You'll agree with this. Being in the hospital is no fun under any circumstances, but one of the biggest problems when you're in the hospital and you're hooked up to a machine and you're waiting to see if Aunt Fanny or Cousin Junior is going to come in to pull the plug, it's really adding insult to injury when you're laying on one of those hospital mattresses, isn't it? Those, it's like a bean bag. And they're little teeny tiny, they're so wide you can't turn over. And they're so thin that you can feel every bone of yours grinding on whatever's underneath that, which seems like a pointed skeletal frame of pure steel, iodized even. And if you try to sit up and get off of it, the bed sores, you're going to attach yourself to that kind of plastic covering, and it's going to take a layer of skin off. And then you have the bed sores that look like that you've been eaten by piranhas. But yeah, the hospital bed mattresses they're so wide you can't get around them, so low you can't get under them, and so high you can't get over them. You just don't want to be anywhere near them.
Again, I don't know what the hell you're talking about or where you're going with all this, but we do know some people that instead of whatever mattresses you're talking about, make the finest mattresses that can be delivered directly to you at home. We're talking about our friends at Helix Sleep.
Yes, or as a matter of fact, if you know you're going to be in the hospital for an extended length of time, I bet if you went ahead and just put that address in and just put the room number, they'd send your Helix mattress right to the hospital.
Yeah,
and then
it doesn't work like that, but let's talk about home delivery.
You could put a couple of those slings around Granny, one around her feet, one up under her arms, and just lift her up and slide the one mattress out, throw it out the window, put the Helix down, and then just get the old folks mattress. Folks, Helix mattresses are for everybody. They got mattresses for people that like firm ones, people that like soft ones. They got mattresses that cool you down, that heat you up, that help with the snoring or the back pain or the sleep apnea. They got kids' mattresses. They've even got old folks mattresses that whenever Aunt Fanny or maybe Granny Ethel goes ahead and just loses control in the middle of the night and waters the plants in her sleep, while it'll suck it right up and shoot it right out into a tube underneath the bed, right out into the street. That's something that you can take comfort in your later years. But folks, no matter what it is, helixsleep.com has a mattress for you. So again, if you're, let's say, for example, you've tried to jump the fountain at Caesar's Palace on a motorcycle and you've fractured your pelvis in 19 places. You're going to want a nice, comfortable mattress, Brian, right? I think, what do you identify with that?
I think you would want a nice, comfortable mattress like the ones they have at Helix Sleep.
Yes, well, you just get on at helixsleep.com and you take a little quiz about how you like to sleep and the position on your side, on your back or whatever, whether your pelvis is broken or not. They may ask you to send a few photographs of your pelvis, unclothed, of course, because they want to make sure the measurements
No, they don't
proper.
do that. They don't ask for that. All you have to do is go to helixsleep.com, of course, promo code JCE, and take the sleep survey, figure out exactly the kind of mattress that is right for you, something that you will love and want, and that's all you have to do. That's the Helix way.
And then it's delivered to your door. And then your pelvis will thank you, because you can just open that box, put it in the place it needs to be, unwrap the plastic wrapping, and it breathes to life. And then you're sleeping not with the fishes, but with the angels. Your birds are chirping, your sun is shining. As a matter of fact, it's going to be so bright for you on a Helix mattress, you're going to have to wear those sleep blinders in the middle of the night just to dull down the sunshine that's beaming down upon you. And if you go to helixsleep.com/JCE, you're going to get 20% off and 2 free dream pillows with the mattress purchase. 20% off. And that's anything. Get 5 or 6 mattresses. Hand some out down the street. You'll get 20% off everything. So that'll add up to a substantial saving. Buy some mattresses for the future. These things only last 15, 20 years, so stock up. 20% off side-wide, 2 free dream pillows with a purchase of a mattress at helixsleep.com/JCE.